Hello, and welcome back to our podcast, Flower Farming in New Zealand, where we dig into the detail of growing beautiful blooms here in Aotearoa. I'm your host, Jo Robinson, a flower farmer, a flower lover, and a creator of floral works. I'm keen to encourage the growing, buying, selling, and the use of our gorgeous local and seasonal flowers. This season, the podcast is brought to you by United Flower Growers, or as it's known in the trade, UFG. Talk to UFG today about buying or selling your flowers through their organisation. Good morning and welcome to Flower Farming in New Zealand. Today I've got a very esteemed guest. I have Dr. Keith Hammett with us, a world-renowned plant breeder, and particularly I've been asked to talk to Keith on the show by many of our listeners who are interested in his Dahlia breeding. Here's my intro of Keith, not his, because he's a man of few words. Dr. Keith Hammett is a private professional plant breeder based in Auckland. He's developed the grounds of his 4-hectare property as an arboretum and the site of numerous plant breeding programs, including amaryllis, arthropodium, carnations, chrysanthemum, clivia, cosmos, dahlias, dianthus, helianthus, lathyrus, mimulus, nemesia, petunia, polyanthus, sandersonia, and xanthodetia. That is a lot of work going on that 4 hectares. To date, more than 300 fully commercial cultivars have been produced. Many of these have been exhibited and marketed overseas. Dr. Keith has close working relationships with the Auckland Regional Botanic Gardens, the University of Auckland, Unitec Institute of Technology, and other research institutes. Keith has written numerous articles for horticultural publications worldwide, authored books, and produced scientific papers. In 2008, he was awarded a Queen's Service Medal for his services to horticulture. Dr. Keith was also awarded the Veitch Memorial Medal in 2013 by the Royal Horticultural Society for his outstanding contribution to the practice of horticulture. That's a heck of a lot of things to have done in a short lifespan, Dr. Keith. Welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you here. Have you got something that you want to add to that introduction?
No.
As I said, a man of few words. This will be short and brief if all your answers are one word. So to start off with, how did you first get into breeding dahlias? What drew you to dahlias?
Well, basically, I had two uncles. One was a professional gardener, and he separated his flower garden from his vegetable garden with sweet peas. So I was very hooked on sweet peas.
Right.
And then the other uncle had inherited the farm, and he grew dahlias.
Was this in Auckland?
No, this was in Britain. I'm a POM.
Never mind.
I've been a Kiwi for 58 years.
Okay.
I consider myself to be a New Zealander, but the first 25 years I was a POM. Now, the interesting thing is that, and this is kind of important, that I had unwittingly chosen the opposite ends of a breeding spectrum. The sweet pea pollinates itself before the flower is open, and the dahlia cannot pollinate itself. It has to have pollen from a different dahlia. Any other genus or species I've bred falls somewhere between those two extremes.
I know we're here to talk about dahlias, but I'm fascinated by this, and if you don't mind the deviation, how do sweet peas pollinate themselves before they flower? How does that happen?
They've evolved over many millions of years. And if you look at the wild sweet pea, which comes from Sicily, it's got a standard petal at the back. It's got wing petals either side. And then there are two more petals which are fused, so they look like the keel of a boat. And in the wild sweet pea, that bottom keel is clamped so that the anthers are in close juxtaposition with the stigma, which is the female part, and the pollen is released 2 days before the flower is open. Now, that has considerable consequences because it means that Lathyrus species are extremely difficult to cross with each other. Most of our garden plants are hybrids between two or more different species, which have come from different parts of the world. So the variability comes from contributions made by those different species. And with the sweet pea,
right,
we've had to rely on mutation. For
Yeah.
variation. And I mean, with the sweet pea, it was introduced to cultivation from Sicily in 1699. and it is essentially a maroon standard and violet wings. Now, the first mutation that occurred turned off the blue gene, and we ended up with a red and white sweet pea, which was called painted lady. And then the next mutation that occurred was turned off the red gene, and you ended up with white. But it took more than a century before there was enough variation for people to start crossing within the genus.
So you have to wait for it to mutate, and
Yeah,
then you,
I didn't personally, but
yeah, no, not in 1690, no. That the breeding is just a collection of mutations rather than you being able to breed for a specific trait that you want.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, we better get back to dahlias or we'll be on sweet peas forever, but it fascinates
Well, not
me.
until a couple of years ago. That was perfectly true, but I did manage, with the help of colleagues, to produce a hybrid between the sweet pea and a newly developed lathyrus or newly discovered lathyrus. And that has actually changed some of the modern sweet peas into hybrids. And any that have got Belenensis in them are now referred to as Lathyrus times Hammettii.
Because they're a
So,
hybrid.
because they're now a hybrid. So we changed it from being a pure breed. It was in cultivation for 200 or 300 years as a pure breeding species, and we've changed it into a hybrid. Now we can go to dahlias when you're ready.
It just fascinates me the amount of work that goes into breeding and how it's not recognized by people as such. It's not recognized by gardeners as being an important thing. But without breeders, we wouldn't have so many of the plants that our gardeners and our flower farmers love. So I take my hat off to breeders. I'm not a patient person, so I couldn't ever do it. But I just find it fascinating that people are prepared to go to that much effort.
Well, I think that's an important point. We have to think in decades. From the time I get an idea, it takes at least 10 years before we can produce something which is then made available.
That blows my mind. 10 years, and you're prepared to think in that time frame. I mean, that to me that is just amazing. So we will get to dahlias because I promised people that we would. What inspires your breeding goals when you're looking at a dahlia? Are you looking for colour or form or plant habit, or is there something else that you personally like to aim for when you're breeding dahlias?
Well, basically, I started breeding to win on the show bench. I don't come from an academic background. My parents recognized the importance of education, but had never got past elementary level themselves. So, when I was at school, mother would be saying to me one minute, get on with your homework. And the next minute she'd be saying, what about sitting on your ass? Get down and do something useful. So, I mean, the consequence was that I wasn't particularly great at school to start with. I came up through the C screen. Horticulture after the Second World War was extremely strong in Britain.
It had to be, didn't it?
It had to be, but I mean, people were reacting after 5 years of war. And as I say, it was very strong. I mean, the local horticultural society that I belonged to had over 2,000 members. There's very few national or international societies that have got that number of members now. And a teenager was a novelty in the 1950s, the same as it would be today. The older established exhibitors sort of mentored me, and I found I could do something. So the training of dahlias to win on the show bench told me a lot about physiology when I was just studying botany at school.
So, can you, without simplifying things, but with putting them in terms that people like myself can understand, can you explain the process of breeding a new dahlia from start to finish?
The single most important thing in any breeding program is to define a goal. You don't have a breeding program unless you have defined a goal which you're aiming for. Now, it's perfectly okay to save seed, which is open pollinated, and see what variation that you get. But that's not a breeding program, that's a look-see.
No, thank you. That's the bee in my bonnet. People who say they're breeding when they're planting from seed. If you plant from seed, you're growing something from seed. If you're breeding, you've had a program, as you call it, a goal, and you've been aiming for something, not just potluck, here's the seed, let's plant it and see what happens.
But having said that, don't put people off from saving seed, because one of the great things about plant breeding is you always have something to look forward to. So, something to get up for in the morning. And there's a real thrill. I mean, I still, after 80 odd years, I still get a thrill from germinating a seed or putting roots on a cutting. The magic has never left me. I think that that is important. And I mean, if you get some experience with saving seed and growing out, you can then lead to a breeding program. And with a lot of our plants, exhibitors have become the main breeders. I mean, it used to be there are firms which produce seed, some of the big companies, but it's a lot of plants like dahlias. Really, the breeding and sweet peas, the breeding had fallen into the hands of exhibitors. So their goal was to breed for the show bench. And if you're an experienced exhibitor, you know what criteria are needed to win on the show bench. Problem is that different plants have different specialist societies, and you get two sorts of societies. You get the collector societies like the rhododendron, camellias, orchids. Those people, set out to develop collections, all right? And if they have shows, they put on a shows, it is to demonstrate the range of variability within a genus.
Okay. Yep.
Other flowers, like dahlias particularly, and sweet peas, are really sporting clubs, because the emphasis is not so much on the plant, it's more on how close you can grow a plant to a predetermined standard.
Okay. Yep.
And that ends up as a breeding cul-de-sac, because all you can hope to do is you've got plants, cultivars, which are near perfection, which are the bankers, the ones that you can choose every year with a reasonable expectation of winning on the show bench. Now, all cultivars, like ourselves, deteriorate with age, and it gets to the point where you need to replace ones which are getting past their best.
I'm replaying the words and trying to put them into terms of how I view a plant and how I would choose what trait I would want to make it
Right.
a more attractive or more valuable or a stronger plant, because I think that's what you would set as a goal, isn't it? You would be looking for a stronger, healthier plant. I know you did a lot of work on different colour foliage for dahlias, didn't you?
Oh, yes. And the thing is, as I say, for 25 years, the whole of my emphasis was to breed cultivars which would win on the show bench. I mean, ironically, the group that I liked best was miniature decoratives, which is a form, which has really been embraced by the flower farmers. But I've been very excited by the flower farmer movement, and things like Ariana Florida has done. And I mean, you've interviewed Yvonne Baker, who works with me when she can. Who are flower farmers, and they have embraced types which have been despised by the exhibition world. I mean, Cafe au lait, which is beloved by flower farmers, is treated
No,
with contempt by exhibitors.
it's actually not a good cut flower, but the customers love it. But as a cut flower, it's a disaster because it has a very short vase life.
I'm very encouraged by the flower farming movement, and it's brought in a lot of younger people,
Mm.
and it's opened up different options.
So, are there traits in dahlia that are more difficult to breed for than others? Is colour more difficult than height, or is leaf colour more difficult than flower colour? Is it just because the genetic material is there within the plant and you're just trying to choose which trait is dominant? Is that how you do it?
Thing you have to remember is that the dahlia in particular is very unusual. You and I have a specific number of chromosome pairs. Each pair has been made up by a contribution from the mother and a contribution from the father. So we have, I think, 27 pairs. Don't quote me on the number, but we have a specific number of pairs of chromosomes. So they're said to be diploid. Now, if you double that, you end up with a tetraploid where you have two sets of every pair. Now, by chance, when the dahlia came into cultivation the same year as the French Revolution, it happened that the two plants which hybridized in the Botanic Garden in Madrid were tetraploids. So when they hybridized, they produce stalactiploid. So the garden dahlia has 4 sets of all of the pairs, which means that the permutations are almost effortless.
Because they're exponentially increasing with each of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, the degree of
Yeah,
variability is virtually infinite.
yeah.
You're
Okay.
probably never going to get 2 seedlings which have got identical genetic makeup. So the data is very special in that regard. But the key thing is the goal is the goal. When you define the goal, you look for parents which have the characteristics that you want. Maybe one has a particular trait that you're interested in. Then you identify another parent which has a trait that you want to bring them together. It's not really rocket science. I mean, a lot of very successful breeders have been intuitive breeders.
Mm.
They've had a very clear goal of what they were aiming for, and they've
And
had a very
probably understood their plants too, haven't they? If they understand their plants, then, as you say, they will see the possibility of the genetic material within the parents will be
yeah,
more obvious to them than it would be to someone like me.
yes. Yes, I mean that's why exhibitors were successful in breeding
Mm,
exhibition dahlias because they know the gene pool. When I
mm.
talk about the gene pool, it's the plants that I've got available to me. It's like a box of paints for a painter.
But I think also that the people who exhibit, they're looking so closely at the blooms and the plant, way more than as a flower farmer. I would go down and I would cut stems and put them in a bucket. For an exhibition, they're going through and they are minutely checking every trait of that plant to make sure it meets the criteria for the show bench, as well as that it is looking perfect, isn't it? They're used to looking at the plant material in a different way to somebody like a home gardener or a flower farmer, unless they have a breeding goal in mind.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've been judging dahlias. I became a qualified judge in Britain when I was 22, when I was still at university. So I've been judging dahlias for over 60 odd years. So I'm always looking through judges' eyes. So I've got to be very careful to actually turn that off because I'll have someone who comes into the garden and they think so, they're very keen on something, which from an exhibition point of view has got a lot of faults.
Yes.
And an analogy I make is that, if you're breeding for something like the show bench, you know very well what the criteria are. And when you've defined your goal, you become an engineer. You work out
Yes.
how to attain that goal. Now, I went to Mexico 30 odd years ago to have a look at the dahlia growing in the wild, and they're all single. And I was struck by the gracefulness of the plants. They didn't have ramrod stems; they had cursive stems which moved in the wind like a mobile. And also, I noticed, that there was considerable variation in the leaf with the foliage. So when I came back from Mexico, I stopped breeding exhibition dahlias and concentrated on, well, first and foremost, leaf color. There were only 3 dark leaf dahlias available when I started. So that was a goal I set out to work on.
Yeah. I love the dark leaf ones. I think they're both in floristry and in the garden. I think those tints and tones of the burgundy and red are beautiful. I do. So, yeah.
Well, the big advantage is, I mean, they make a contribution to the garden before they flower. They
Yes.
make a contribution when they're flowering, and the seed pods themselves are dark. You get the value for your money. But it made me realize that I had become a practitioner in the visual arts. I was no longer an engineer. It took me a long time to realize that. It is really quite important because you see it.
But without having the skills that you've taught yourself as a judge, the skills that you've taught yourself as an engineer, and then your skills as a visual artist, it's the combination of those 3 things that, to me, would produce the dahlia that you would be most proud of.
That's a bit like asking which is your favorite child.
I could do that. I could ask you which is your favourite child, but I'd rather ask you what's your favourite dahlia that you've bred.
I don't have a favorite.
Oh, come on, Dr. Keith. There must be something that really sticks out for you. Do we give you the choice of the top 3 or 4?
Well, with dahlias, I guess for exhibition dahlias, there's one called Elizabeth Hammett. That did very well on the show bench for quite a long time. It was a lavender miniature decorative. And then there's another miniature decorative I bred called Miss Piggy, which came out at about the time the Muppets came on television. And that is very popular with the flower farmers. It's in short supply, but Apollo Farm is propagating it to make it available again. And then with the dark leaf dahlias, probably one which was renamed Mystic Illusion. I called it Knockout because it was bright yellow with a black eye, with dark foliage. And I'm really quite proud of Knockout. It sold over 2 million units in the last 10 years.
For someone who doesn't have a favourite dahlia, you've just given us your top 3. That's pretty good. So have you come across any major, something that was a real surprise to you with your breeding, something you didn't expect from your engineering?
One doesn't immediately come to mind, no.
Do you think that's because you had a goal so that you were engineering towards the goal so there shouldn't be surprises?
Not really. I welcome surprises. I mean, interestingly, Deb Collett in Australia showed me some pictures of a seedling that she's got, and it's a single. I don't know if you're familiar with the red rudbeckia. Instead of having a flat central disc, it has a domed disc.
Yep.
And she hadn't noticed that, and I got quite excited about it. And she's very generously sent me seed to see whether it will pop up again.
To have the dome disc in the centre.
Yeah.
And is that a dark coloured domed disc like a rudbeckia?
I only saw photographs that she showed me,
Yeah.
but I do notice there's quite a lot of dark leaf ones in the seedlings, which are waiting to be planted. Right now, no, I mean, the weather has been so bad, the ground is waterlogged. I haven't been able to plant my dahlias yet, which is getting late.
So what's the most challenging part of maintaining a specific line that you're wanting to develop to reach your goal?
It's probably trying to keep the plants alive. I talked about a gene pool. You have to maintain a collection, and there's a limit to the number of plants that you can handle. So that is a problem, is keeping them alive. I mean, once they're actually in cultivation and they're being propagated every year, they're safe. The moment that you try and keep a core collection, it's very difficult to make sure that it doesn't erode. I mean, you can only leave a dahlia in the ground for 2 or 3 seasons before it chokes itself and starts dying.
Because the roots are getting too much. There's just too many corms.
Yeah, it's too much old tissue builds up.
Right. And does that, at that point, are you risking the health of the dahlia as well as the breeding material of the dahlia by leaving it there too long?
No, I mean, it's just a matter, as I say, of keeping the things alive until you want them. You make a cross between 2 parents. You don't know whether that was a good cross or not until at least the first generation. And you really need to grow. I mean, sometimes you select something which looks really promising, and then you grow it the next year and you wonder what possessed you. You wonder whether you dug up the wrong tuber.
So in that instance then, would you be leaving those tubers in the ground for a couple of more seasons to see if it actually did, I don't know what the right word is to use. It's not stabilize because it's not changing, but does it strengthen and become what you saw originally? Or do you just look at it after year 1 and say, I don't know what I was thinking. It's on the compost heap or it's in the burn pile or whatever. Do you persevere with it for a couple of seasons?
Again, it depends. With a sweet pea, one has to cross it by hand. You have to open the flower before the pollen has been released, remove the anthers, put the flower back together again, then 2 days later, introduce pollen from the other parent. With the dahlia, you can make hand crosses, but it's not very productive. It's a lot of work for very few seed. So I mean, what I've done over the years, I've either put the 2 parents in a degree of isolation and grown them together and let the bees and the other insects do the pollinating. Or most often I put together a polycross where I maybe have 5 cultivars, which I grow as a group, some distance from any other dahlias, and let the bees do the pollinating. So then in the next generation, you go in and you see if there's anything which is close to the goal that you had set. You will select those parents, right? As I said, and then the next year, some of those will perform quite well and others won't perform well. So you eliminate them. So it's a distillation process. And the mistake people make is they release stuff too quickly and they start selling it before it's been properly trialed.
I like that description, a distillation, because that just makes so much sense that you're weeding out basically the ones that aren't reaching your goals.
We create the diversity and then we distill it season by season until we think it's got the right character. The
That's
thing to understand too is that if you go back 100 years, a lot of nurseries did their own breeding, and the amateurs weren't really breeding very much because they were buying from the nurseries. But then over the years, the nurseries have become production units, and so there is a separation. So I mean, I'm a breeder, but I need somebody actually to get that out to the public. I need someone to grow it and then retail it stuff. And this is one of the consequences of that is that quite often you've got a plant with a name, like as I said with knockout. The marketers always think they know better. What happens with a lot of my stuff? It gets renamed. I continue to call it what I gave it.
good
I
on you.
have to remember what.
Well, someone else has called it. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Season 2 of this podcast is proudly sponsored by UFG, New Zealand's largest flower wholesaler. While UFG is best known for its in-house auctions in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, it operates other platforms to ensure growers connect with the right buyers and buyers with the best flowers. Listen to our sponsors episode of the podcast and check out the UFG website to learn about the innovative remote online flower auctioning system and the virtual wholesale platform. And if you need another option, there are 4 on-site wholesale outlets based in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Invercargill. UFG, connecting growers with the right buyers and buyers with the best flowers. Hey petals, and just like that, we're back into today's conversation. What protections do breeders have for their creations from the time you've recognised that something has value either for flower farmers or for a home garden or whatever format it's going to be used? Who or what protects your rights as a breeder so that you recoup something financially for the time and the effort you've put into getting that plant to the stage where it can be released?
You'd be familiar with patents in the
Yeah.
general world. I mean,
Yeah.
we get all sorts of implements and so on, which have got patent protections. It's been understood for several centuries in a great many countries that there is a patent scheme so that you can protect your invention. Now, it wasn't really until after the Second World War that the idea of plant patents became available. And different countries have adopted plant breeders' rights or plant variety rights legislation, which enables you to take a patent on your particular plant. So the process is you make a submission to the Plant Variety Rights Office, who, for a fee, will undertake testing to show that what you have got is different to any existing cultivar,
Okay.
and that they will award you. If that passes the test of being distinct and separable from other cultivars, you get your plant patent basically, or your plant variety right. I actually spend quite a bit of my time as a describer for plant variety rights. But the thing is, once you have got them, I mean, if for instance I had taken a patent here in Auckland, I don't know what's happening in Invercargill.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to understand, how protected you are.
It's a very good scheme, but you actually need spies on the ground
Yeah.
to tell you if someone is propagating and selling your stuff. Sometimes people fall foul of this because they're unaware that it's got a plant patent, and then
Yeah.
they have to be gently reminded that either to stop selling or pay a royalty.
Pay a royalty.
And I mean that's where the intellectual property people like Malcolm Woolmore of Kiwi Flora come in, because that is their job. Basically, a breeder offers a basket of options which people can dip into, and sometimes something will take off, and sometimes it won't. But that's my job, is to produce options. Because at one stage I went through a period of modesty and thinking that the marketers would know what was needed. But what I found was they don't actually have that imagination. You can show them something. It's a bit like buying ties in the days people used to wear ties. Um, if you presented somebody with three ties, they can make a choice. If you presented them with 50 ties, they choked, basically. What I found was that the marketers, again, have a different paradigm of the world. So that's when I realized, as I say, that as with an artist, whether it's music or painting or anything else, it is that creativity.
But also understanding the plant and how it's best going to be used. Like artistically, you may breed a dahlia, which you think is absolutely stunning, and you can see that it has all of the attributes that's needed for a fantastic home garden dahlia. But then Yvonne or Joshua might come to you and say, that would look fantastic in a vase. And it's then up, the next step is to trial it. Does it last well in a vase, or is it best as a garden variety? And the marketers don't look at it in that way. They look at its saleability and do they have a client base to sell it to, rather than, I would look at it, which client base is it and why would they like it? And you'd be saying, but I can breed it to do this, or I can propagate it to do that. As you say, it's different viewpoints from different types of people on the same plant. It's just so very, very different.
Yeah, well, the people who produce the tubers are important. I mean, quite a lot of exhibition dahlias which are being bred by exhibitors simply don't have the ability to produce cuttings, a sufficient number of cuttings, or they don't produce a decent tuber. So, I mean, quite often in the exhibition world, you're only dealing probably with a few hundred plants. An exhibitor, you may only need 5 plants to get stuff on the show bench.
Mm.
All right. But if you're a Dutch producer wanting to produce tubers to go in packets that are going to go into the garden centres and
Yeah.
supermarkets, you want something that's going to have the ability to produce a lot of cuttings which actually root easily, because some cultivars, they don't root well, and some do. And then the tuber shape and the size is important.
Oh, yeah.
It's much better to have a nice compact tuber
Yeah.
which will fit into a plastic bag.
Yeah.
You don't want the thing a yard long. I mean, some of the species dahlias have very long tubers which flop all over the place, and they're quite unsuitable. So
And
it's a
that,
matter of horses for courses.
yes, there's just so much information that is needed to make the right decisions, to know whether it is actually going to be a suitable plant. I hadn't thought about the packaging for this resale and those kind of things, but you're completely right. Why would they want something that's going to cost 5 times as much to ship, or need so much more sawdust to store in, or any of those kind of, and probably minor points to a marketer, but they'd be major points to a producer.
But another thing to consider is that, I mean, in England, and certainly when I was active over there, it was normal to take cuttings and grow your exhibition plants from a cutting raised plant. Over here and in America, there is the practice of chicken legs, which you cut the tuber up
Okay.
so that you have one piece of tuber, but you've
Mm,
got to be very careful that you have got a piece of the crown region, the
mm.
interface from the last year's stem and the tuber, where the buds are. So, I mean, some are easy to divide, some are very difficult. So, I mean, that is another criterion that comes in.
So a devious breeder who had a plant that they loved would try and have the goal also of making it quite difficult to divide, so that they can maintain their stock for themselves until they've got the numbers up to move it out into the real world.
Yeah, but it probably shouldn't go into the real world.
See, you've got such distinct goals. You know exactly what you want to achieve with your plant and its roots, which is pretty amazing. I've got some questions for you from some of our listeners. So these questions here have come from flower farmers. So it's from a flower farming point of view. The first one was seed storage. How do you store the seed, and for how long do you think it is possible to store the seed?
Put it in the deep freeze. I've had sweet pea and dahlia seed in the deep freezer now for 50 years, and they're fully viable.
Wow.
Virtually any dry seed, the only ones I can't do it with are things like amaryllis and clivia, which have got a fleshy seed. You can't freeze those. But otherwise, deep freeze is the way to go.
So would you put them inside like a snap lock bag, or do they need any material?
Just in paper packets within something like an ice cream container.
Okay, right. Next question. What do you do to maintain plant health to ensure that breeding plant lines are not at risk of loss or devastation from one year to the next? And they've given as their examples armyworm, which we don't have down here, and powdery mildew. So any words of wisdom on those two?
I trained as a plant pathologist and turned myself into a plant breeder. I worked for 15 years on powdery mildew, so I'm very conscious. I'm very conscious of the first pustule.
Right.
The moment I see the first pustule, I will spray with a fungicide.
And armyworm, is it something that you have to deal with? What does it do to dahlias? Does it get into the tubers?
I don't know. I'm not. It's not something I've suffered with. I'm not
No.
not an entomologist. I was a pathologist. I was a fungal guy.
How do you decide what is good breeding stock? I think that's the actual question.
Experience, I guess. I mean, you do find that some cultivars will combine with a number of other cultivars and produce good quality seedlings from which you know got a reasonably high selection rate. It is a matter of experience. Record keeping is tremendously important, and you can then identify parents, which will give you a good good percentage of offspring. But you do need a tracking system, which I've evolved. I've evolved one that works for me. Different people
Yeah.
have different ideas.
And it would depend on your goal as well, wouldn't it? How you would set up your tracking to get to that goal.
Yes.
Yeah. Next question is, what role can DNA sampling play?
Very little.
Yeah. Because?
Well, if you identified a trait which could now be inserted into the Dahlia genome, you would need very sophisticated laboratory techniques to do it, and it would be much too expensive.
Yeah.
Well, let's for instance see that there are plants now which are being made to glow because someone has introduced genes from an organism which had biofluorescence. The holy grail of dahlias in terms of color is blue. There isn't a blue dahlia in the same way there isn't a yellow sweet pea. And it would be technically feasible to identify genes for blue in a different organism now, and to take that gene sequence and put it into the dahlia. And I mean, it would be immensely expensive. And I mean, certainly in New Zealand, there has been a great deal of resistance to genetic engineering, which I think was justifiable 20, 25 years ago because it really wasn't that sophisticated. It was a risky process. It wasn't engineering. It was far too crude
Mm.
25 years ago. But the
Yep.
developments in that field have become very, very much more precise and could be done safely. And there is a lot of thought at the moment about revising the regulations on genetic modification in New Zealand, which I think is justifiable. I think it was justifiable to be cautious 25 years ago. And I think it's safe enough to pursue now. But I mean, the cost of it would be enormous. It's not likely that you could recoup the cost of doing it.
There's no guarantees that you would reach your goal before somebody else reached the same goal. If DNA sampling was being used to achieve the goal, then someone else could have also spent that kind of money and beaten you to it, and then you've wasted all that time, effort, and energy. Plant a seed. Just plant a seed and see what happens. Do you use tissue culture to bulk up varieties?
I don't personally, but it's very important. All the mystics, the dark leaf dahlias, are propagated annually from tissue culture. So they're multiplied in tissue culture and then they are passed on to a nursery to wean them. You have liner nurseries which produce young plants from tissue
Yeah,
culture, and then they're sold on to a nursery which does the finishing. And
does the
there again,
bulking.
that's where Kiwi Flora comes in. They take care of the organization of that. When a breeder's only as good as the chain, I mean, we've got to have people to handle the intellectual property rights, take plant variety rights, and organize the distribution. And then you need marketers, then you need retailers. So we're all equally important. I
Yes.
can produce the most marvelous dahlia, but unless those downstream operations take place, it never gets to people outside.
And you've got to have those people outside who want to buy it as well, don't you?
One of my biggest rewards actually in breeding is when I mean, a case in point at the weekend, we had a flower show in Auckland on Saturday. And I had a stand there with sweet peas. And I had a number of people who came up to me and said, look, I've been buying your stuff, for the last 10 years. And it's given me immense pleasure. And it's very rewarding because you realize that you had a relationship with that person, which you were
Yeah.
unaware of until
Yes.
that moment of time. There's a little bit of magic in that. Writing and plant breeding are very similar in as much that we send stuff out into the world. We only get fleeting glimpses of where it lands.
Yeah.
So there are dimensions which are not immediately rewarding, not immediately obvious. I find that very rewarding.
It's rewarding and satisfying that something you have done has given somebody else joy.
Yes.
And I think that's where flower farmers get their love of flowers from, is that if you give somebody a bunch of flowers or if you gave somebody a bunch of sweet peas, they smile and they appreciate that. And it doesn't matter to them what else has been going on. That flowers says, in a way, it's saying, I care, I've tried, thank you, whatever it's saying, you're saying something. And I think it just gives the grower or the breeder or whatever just joy and satisfaction in seeing what their flowers and plants do for people. I think it's a wonderful way of looking at it. And having that opportunity to connect with people at a show is lovely. Very cool. So, final question for you, because you mentioned it slightly before. Someone has asked, naming new breeds, is it a fun or a challenge to find names not used before?
People have little black books, don't they?
I don't know, Dr. Keith. Do you have a little black book?
I have a little white book. If I have a moment of inspiration, that I'm driving or listening to the radio or something, and a word will hit me, and I think, gosh, that'd make a great cultivar name. So it goes into the little white book, which now contains over 2,000 names.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
If I delve into that, I wonder sometimes what possessed me. Most often, the plant will suggest a name, it'll become a nickname, but you can rely on the fact that some market is going to change it.
But you can ignore them. You can call it what you want.
As I say, when you're working with a plant, it gets a nickname. I had a cat that has adopted me who just turned up and integrated himself into the family, and he hasn't got a name past Black Cat at the moment. I can't find a name that suits him better.
You need to read your little white book and see if there's a name. Sooty.
I don't think he's a sooty. Used to be a puppet called Sooty, wasn't there?
Oh, there was too. That was black and white though, wasn't it? Yeah. Never mind. Dr. Keith, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It blows me away the amount of information that's in your brain. We think very differently because we have different personalities and different brain patterns, obviously. But I think that it is amazing what you have done for horticulture, not just with dahlias and with sweet peas. And we didn't even talk about the clivias and the xanthodias and everything else that you have worked with. But I would like to say thank you for not just this interview, but for what you have done for horticulture and for what you are doing in supporting flower farmers, because I think it's people like you that make our jobs easier, and we appreciate you. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Sorry about the technical issues that we had, but hopefully we will be able to produce something that you are proud of, and you can name the podcast from your little white book. How's that?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Until next time, petals, smile, be happy. Please follow along this season as with the support of UFG, we can bring you flower farming in New Zealand. UFG, New Zealand's largest flower broker, talk to them today about buying and selling your flowers.